As David said, we did have a pretty busy start to the year, and it was a very early start, and certainly most of you people in the room tonight were involved immensely throughout the year. Just want to run through really just a couple of statistics and a couple of things that we set out to do, and then a couple of improvements, I suppose, towards the end that we're going to plan to do so that we capture those lessons learned and improve for next year as well. So I titled this thing that I believe our past season, that our brigades we were well planned, we were certainly well prepared, and we were successful in what we set out to do, and that was certainly evident through the response that we had. So going on from the previous year, most of you will remember that we set about trying to put in place a local control model so that we did ensure that there was local control at every fire that we had, so that whether it was a local captain or local group captain, I know that sounds a bit funny, but in some senses a lot of people do try and defer to the fire control centre, and we wanted to make sure that things happen at a local level at every job that we had, no matter how big or small. So at the end of last season we agreed, particularly with our senior management team, that we're going to have a pre-incident plan, and that was going to establish things like standby triggers, fireground management needs, that maintenance of local control as a priority to ensure that that actually happened, and that we set a logistics standard. So things like feeding of firefighters at the fireground, things like fatigue management, shift length issues, those sorts of things, which are easily overlooked at times, but I don't have to remind you guys that if you get missed out on a feed at a fireground in the middle of a 12-hour shift, that people don't appreciate that too well. We also wanted to utilise other media just to better influence things and make our people aware. And in the lead up to summer, we need to make sure that our community as a whole is aware, but more particularly those brigade members that are our fringe dwellers, if you like. We all know that in every brigade you've got anywhere from 6 to 15 or so key people, but outside of that you've got another 20 odd people that are the fringe dwellers. We need to get them on board as well. So in our response code, David's already spoke about that, it's pinned up on the board there, and it's our pre-incident plan, if you like, but it was drafted certainly well before the season. It was run through our senior management team a couple of times before the season. They had a fair input into it. We set some triggers for responses, so basically from the bottom left of the plan there, the little lovely coloured box, it's basically just anything below very high fire danger is normal business. The yellow box is very high fire danger. The tan box is severe, then extreme, and then catastrophic. And each of those columns relate to a particular task, whether it's the brigade response numbers, use of aviation, the use of plant, the communications assistance that we may need, Section 44 statuses, logistics requirements, on and on it goes. It's all listed. And as David said, when we get to the stage where some of our staff here begin to retire, they are the game rules by which we play. So we don't need to really train more people. If you get a new manager in Canobola Zone in the next 7 or 8 years, then we don't want to be retraining that new manager. So it was endorsed by our group captains and senior management team before the season. It was certainly then implemented. It's now being checked against the results, which was pretty good, but we're now reviewing it to make it relevant and ensure that it's right for next year. So there's a few changes to be made, but so far so good. It's been a good working document. So the fire season. Before the fire season, if you cast your mind all that way back, there was a fair bit of, hopefully this sound will work.
It's been the hottest year on record so far in New South Wales, and the heatwave is forecast to continue through the spring. That's caused a concern for firefighters, with above normal bushfire potential now predicted.
So this is all before the fire season.
Hazard reduction burning is in full swing. Each month there are around 150 operations like this in a race to beat the full force of summer.
Up to one of the warmest winters on record. Obviously we're a little bit concerned because it's dried out the fuel already.
1,100 fires are burning around the state, and it's not just been the warmest winter in more than 100 years, it's been the warmest year since records began.
Between January and August for New South Wales, we've been 1.4 degrees above the average.
The bushfire outlook is not as severe as last spring and summer, but remains serious, particularly along the east and west coasts as well as inland. Above average rainfall in the winter has led to heavy grass fuel loads in New South Wales, particularly in areas west of the Great Dividing Range, the Tablelands and Upper Hunter. And there's also the danger of higher than normal bushfire conditions in the forested areas of southern New South Wales and ranges. Last year the worst fires were around Coonabarabran and Yass. This year scientists are more concerned about the coast.
An area stretching right down the coast, covering most of New South Wales.
What we're concerned about, I guess, is most of New South Wales, apart from the northeast and the far west, will be predicted to have above average fire risk for the summer.
Firefighters say the time to take precautions is now. Philippa McDonald, ABC News.
So the message that was being given right across the state by the Rural Fire Service and every other fire agency on the eastern Australia was that the hottest winter and spring on record, the driest run into summer that we'd had for a long time, heavy grasslands fuels, particularly in central and western New South Wales. So that all painted a picture for us. So that continued on. We then had those early heatwave conditions, and they continued on from October, where we had the fires like the State Mine Fire, we had the Blue Mountains fires then, we had those fires around the Hawkesbury and up around the Upper Hunter that we all sent crews to. We also had our own fires in that time. We started in October ourselves with a couple of fires. The Central Mulling fire up in the Pines was early. The Cannon fire that we had in Goolagong, in the western part of Cowra was earlier than what we would have expected. So they were all conditions that were really the result of those weather influences from before the season. So I think the good part about that, the planning that we had done previously and the awareness that was on, I've got another little thing here that we can show. So just typical of the sort of media that was going out at the time.
Good evening. Sydney is on alert for a spring scorcher tomorrow, the hottest October day ever, with a high of 39 degrees predicted. From midnight, a total fire ban takes effect, with firefighters and ambulance crews expected to be working flat out.
Perfect spring weather at Bondi today, but tomorrow, even here, there'll be no escaping the Sydney heat wave. At the Bureau, a glowing red screen is predicting fiery conditions ahead.
We're forecasting a temperature of 39 degrees. That'll be the highest ever October temperature on record for Sydney.
The right mix for bushfire. High temperatures, strong northwest winds gusting up to 70 k's, very little humidity.
Realistically, it's a really awful day from a fire point of view.
A total fire ban covers most of the state. The fire risk is listed as extreme in Sydney, the Hunter Valley and the Illawarra. The Rural Fire Service says thousands of volunteers are ready to go. They'll have strike teams made up of 5 tankers each, placed in 25 fire-prone areas.
We can swamp those areas as quickly as possible. The idea is to not let any fire take hold tomorrow.
Wise words from our Deputy Commissioner. That's the key, is actually get there quick enough you can put it out, particularly the weather conditions I was talking about then, 70 km/h winds. We were fortunate through most of our summer that we didn't get those winds. So that was, I believe, a saving grace for us. During the fire season, the incidents that we had during the period, 192. So that's counting all incidents, not just the fires, but everything. Which is really a pretty quiet year for us. Typically we would have for the year somewhere around about 500 to 550 fires on an average year. 500 to 550 incidents per year. The year to date, so 12 months from today basically, in that 12-month period we've had 346. So relatively quiet. I'd like to think that it was quiet because of the type of community education programs that we've had, those Gumtree meeting processes that we go through each year, but more particularly just the community awareness that's led through media messages like we've just seen, plus with our own websites, Facebook, the other social media that we do use, it just paints the picture to the community that things are dire, and particularly when they look out their window. And if you remember back to October, November, December, there wasn't too much green around, and there was still a fair amount of grass around in those months. It wasn't until we got second week in February, we got that rain, that things certainly did change, and changed dramatically. So area burnt, as David said earlier, 1,021 hectares is what was burnt in our bushfire danger period. So just a couple of graphs now. The incidents that we had for the by season, basically. So the blue is what we had in the fire season. The red is what we had outside the fire season. So that's year to date, 12-month picture, and 192 in the fire season, 153 outside. So those people, our councils probably need to take note of this, where they think that nothing happens in the winter time, nothing happens in the off season. It certainly does. You know, we've almost got as many incidents in the off season as we do in the fire season. By local government area, you can see there where the incidents are, and predominantly Blaney, Orange and Cowra have around about the same amount of incidents. You know, they're roughly on par, whereas Cabon had about 160 incidents in comparison with about 55 to 60 odd in the rest of the three districts. So Cabon being a little bit larger, being a little bit more on the slopes rather than the tablelands type country, having different weather influences, and certainly having a rural bent means that you do get a few more fires in that Cabon area. You've seen this one before, but for us that speaks volumes in terms of being able to get onto the fires quickly, put them out, that response mechanism, the awareness of our brigades particularly, being available, being ready. When the pages go off or the call comes in, people respond, and we respond in numbers. We respond with plant and aircraft support, and we wrap up those fires. And you can see there that 137 of our total incidents were less than 10 hectares, and the vast majority of those were less than 5 hectares. The incident types, 158 fires compared to 187 non-fire. So you can see that those people that think we just do firework, it's not the case. So motor vehicle accidents, other types of calls, whether it's calls for assistance from community, assisting other agencies, they make up the bulk of what we do. It's not just about firefighting. And those other incidents are motor vehicle accidents 63, there's 34 vehicle fires there, which is a bit of a concern. It's almost half the number of MBAs. Structural is 21 and 69 others, so those assist other agencies and other types of jobs. So just paints a picture about the type of work that you guys do. In terms of the fires, the three major fires that we had was the Central Mullion fire first. It was a year of pine fires, really. We've got a fair bit of pine forests in our area of operation, and I've been here 17 years now, and not really been involved in a pine fire at all, and not many of us have. This year, that was the Patel's Forest. It's a totally unmanaged pine forest, owned by people who live elsewhere. It was started by a stolen vehicle, which was parked down here in a little bitty a fairly steep gully, and by the time the first truck arrived there, pretty much the fire had escaped up that gully up to about this area here where you've got that section of burnt country. So it took really within 3 days it was pretty much wrapped up. It did spot into this native country to the east, which is national park country. A little bit of that was burnt, but really it was a pretty good job when all said and done. It's a difficult job, particularly the first two shifts, where the flame pipe was particularly like sort of 2 o'clock in the morning, was quite significant, and it did threaten some crews at one stage, and they had to cut through the pad just out of shot on this fire. But pretty much our focus was to keep it within the pines at all times, and we achieved that result. And through good work and fantastic patrol from the local brigades there, after about 8 days that fire was declared out. It's going the wrong way. Yeah, so a couple of little photos there, just of some people doing a bit of work, but that was the stolen car. It's a known spot where people do dump cars. There was, I think, 3 cars in that location, a couple of them being pushed out of the way by the dozer. 5 cars, thanks Roy. 5 cars at the bottom of that hill. The other fire that was a fairly large one was a cannon fire. I wasn't actually here for this one. I was in Sydney at the time. But that fire started late one afternoon. It was a fairly windy day. Did take a bit of a run, as you can see. Started at the bottom of the picture, down around the homestead here. Took a run that way and did do some damage to farm machinery. So burnt a header there and a couple of tractors and whatnot. But wrapped up within a couple of hours, and I think 100 hectares that fire was. Just on that. The other fire which was of note was the Newbridge fire. So again, the pine fire, it started late one afternoon from a cause we've not been able to determine. Started on the outside of the pines. Half of that pine forest had been, again, private forest. Relatively unmanaged, although that picture just shows you the topography that the brigade's working in. Some had been harvested, and that fire, whilst it was wrapped up within probably 3 shifts, it required patrolling for the best part of 10 to 12 days. Burnt 35 hectares. So again, it was a fantastic result of brigades. And there, sorry. No matter, it's not going to work. I had a little video clip there to show you a news story about exactly what happened, and particularly with the support of the plant that we had there. We had a dozer, a couple of graders, and 2 fixed-wing aircraft and 2 helicopters at that fire. So 35-hectare fire. Most people would say that's a little bit of an overreaction, having that level of support. But if you don't have that level of support, that's when it becomes the bigger operation. So I think we had something like about 14 tankers on that job in its peak, with those couple of items of plant and the aircraft support that were there. So the fact was, everyone was able to go home. Most people were able to go home after 3 shifts, and the local brigades patrolled that for the next 10 to 12 days, and all was well. The air various support that we provided, it started early. So Lithgow Blue Mountains back in October, many of you in this room would have been on some of those crews. So 93 people over the space of about 3 to 4 rotations actually went to that state mine fire. We sent a number of people, including some IMT personnel, to Hawkesbury to assist with the fire that was around the Colo and the House Swamp area. Single, another Bulga fire that was there. We sent people up there, firefighting crews and IMT staff, for a number of weeks. Generally it was IMT personnel. We did send 1 crew and group officer to South Australia, and they were there doing a rotation, and they flew there, manned trucks that were there and flew home again, which was good. And the Victorian assault that we had, we actually drove trucks there on the first day that we were asked, and that tanker stayed on site and was remanned again for a second rotation. We had a further 3 rotations planned, but fortunately some rain was in the air, and they were able to come home after 2 rotations. So it's really great to see that not only were we busy in our own area, but we're also able to provide assistance in other localities, including in the state. So the things that I think went well were, number 1, the awareness, that of our communities particularly, but certainly of our brigade personnel. Everyone was on their toes this year, given the dry conditions, the hot weather that we had month after month. Everyone was well aware that if a fire started, we need to get on top of it quick, or it's going to cause some damage. We had good plans in place, so we were well prepared. The deployment structures that we used, particularly with our response code, having predetermined triggers for response, and certainly the use of aircraft and plant. And one big change in the last couple of years has been the availability of plant through state operations. So we basically ring the MIC desk at state operations, ask for approval for plant for one or more shifts, and generally that's provided. So it just cuts down the time that we could often lose years ago in trying to get graders or other plant for the site. Our containment was quick, and our patrol, in my view, was first class. No one shirked their responsibilities when it came to actually making sure that our fire was patrolled day after day, shift after shift, to ensure that it didn't go anywhere in the preceding days. The lessons that we've learned, basically, the use of rapid weighted response. So the bad days, we don't just send 2 tankers out to have a look at the fire, we send 6, 10, 12, 14 tankers out on those bad days to make sure that we're actually matching the resources to the risk that's there. We've learnt a fair bit about fire ground control. We've got a fair bit of work to do on that we'll be working with our group captains in the off-season about. We've got a good set of tasks for our second-in group officer now, those logistical functions to make sure that things like, we've now got we've got 2 mobile cool rooms that actually go to the site with Tucker on board. So it's those logistical tasks that our second-in man's going to look after, so that the IC on the fire ground can get on with fire ground management. We need to make better use of our communications networks and those differing networks that are available to us, so there'll be some things that we capture in the next couple of months about that. And one thing that we do need to do more, and that comes from you guys on the fire ground, is to communicate the logistical arrangements on the fire ground. And then what's actually there in terms of tucker, fuel, bulk water, those sorts of things, because there's plenty of people that have reported to me that they didn't know, even though things were on site, they didn't know that they were on site. And we need to make sure that we do our after-action reviews at the fire grounds. So when we have a debrief, we don't do it back here, we do it at the fire ground within time at the completion of that particular fire. So the things we have got planned for this coming off-season is some command, control and communication training for our group captains, which is happening here in June, July. We will be doing a fire brigade review of our boundaries with the fire brigades, just to try and lock away some things, particularly in the Orange local government area. And we'll be doing some communications workshops with all of our brigades, where we'll be doing a travel and road show to your local areas. We need to pull in 2 to 3 brigades to a particular location. We'll coincide it with our AED servicing, because they are due for servicing this year. So once they're being done, we'll pull some people together and we'll do some communications workshops on the digital radio network, how it works, how you navigate between zones in the radio, so that you can better utilise the communication networks next fire season to your advantage. That's it from me. Any questions? Any observations? Righto? All done, all silent. Yeah, great.